Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
Does the United States have a depopulation problem? What do we do about that?
No, I did not watch Man of the Year, but I did read The Atlantic. And I really wanted to kind of spend some time with you and talk about Derek Thompson and his little journey into life and death and the sustainability of our republic. Because it's funny, we look at these traditional far left publications, and even they're scratching their head and saying, this whole thing, no matter where you stand on abortion or drugs or this or that, we're on an unsustainable path and we better wake up. I don't know what they plan to wake up to.
Well, it's interesting, Michael, because the depopulation crowd is coming from two sides. There's a side that has genuinely been talking about this for 20 years or longer, noting the simple statistics and how dangerous it is for any society. Let's just take a look at what's going on in Italy. I mean, I think you and I are appropriate to be talking about what's going on in Italy. My kids have been over there multiple times, and we have business friends and associates that have companies there that have spent a good amount of time there. And the reports that we continually get back is you can drive through Italy into some of these beautiful, quaint little towns, and you won't find anybody under the age of 65. I mean, the depopulation in Italy is just incredible. People stopped having kids. And what happens with depopulation is we don't think about it much in America. We've been just this manifest destiny, continuing to grow culture, and most people have never stopped to think about it. In fact, when you think about depopulation, it's a popular idea. I mean, there's kind of this hip, chic idea that if you're really cool and really scientific and really into world global trends, then what you really want is fewer people, particularly if you're concerned about climate change and global warming and that entire portfolio, because humans, in fact, are the enemy. We're the ones who are making, nature would get along just fine without us. So the less of us there are, the better off we're going to be. And this has been cyclical in culture over the last more than 100 years. Well, now we're to the place where when it comes to America, whether it's from the left or from the right, from the far left or the far right, whether it's coming from concerns about economies or religion or climate or whatever, there's a consensus that's growing across all the spectrums. We're in trouble.
We got a problem. We got a big
problem.
All right, so I'm sitting here reading Derek Thompson, and I'm thinking, okay, if Derek Thompson came here to the table at 1850, he would agree. He would agree on the cause. And I want to echo, some of this is me and some of this is him. So this isn't an attempt to plagiarize any of Derek's ideas. Derek touched on several of these. He left a few off. I thought it's interesting that I didn't see him bring up climate change, which you're right to start there, because the assumption is we have too many people, too few resources. We're going to have less people or this is unsustainable. And then the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter if you do all the climate change things, you don't really impact the temperature more than 1/10 of 1 degree. So it's not even good science, but it's really bad for where we're heading, the unsustainability of our economy. Then we could go to the gay population. We could go to families, and do people see marriage in future generations as necessary? The covenant of marriage, the covenant of family, or are they just having fewer kids because of inflation and expense? Not marrying as much, not having kids as much. Abortion, not having kids as much. Violence, drugs, drug overdoses, accidents, morbid obesity, diabetes. Sometimes, David, when it's all of the above.
Yeah.
That's a much deeper picture than just picking any one of these. Though that's great for if we were doing talk radio or a seminar. The all of the above is what's made this a crisis.
You can take this angle from multiple philosophical launching points as well. Let's just, for example, start with a position of evolution. One of the primary principles of evolution, the theory of evolution, is that the human species, and all species, in fact, are instinctively programmed to work toward the survival of the fittest. Now, the human appears to have, according to the evolutionary theory,
Right to sperm, right, David? Even sperm is designed that way.
yeah, I'm sure it's all
To some degree.
The idea is it's throughout biology that survival of the species and in essence procreation and survival is a part of what Darwin observed and all of his followers have observed since that time. And so again, what we've got is a situation where the human being has both the capacity for conscience, which makes the human species unique, speaking now from an evolutionary point of view, as well as the ability to reason and make decisions, all a part of that mindset of what's inside the human. Well, what happens if the species ceases to survive because the willful choices made by the top of the food chain end up in the annihilation of the top of the food chain? In other words, what happens if we start killing ourselves at a level from which we cannot recover? Because the thing about population rates are that they are dependent upon the childbearing years of the female population and the male population. So there are only so many years in which the number of people that are in the culture, the number of women that can bear children, the number of men that can procreate with women, I mean, the biology is still there. If you reach the point of no return, where you are not replacing your population for a number of generations in that fertile class of humans, you can't recover. More people will be dying than will be born, and you can't just flip a switch and turn it around.
Or you got to import them, which we're going to get to. You bring up something very important. Here's how I look at it. I want to see if you look at it the same way. So we came back from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
That could have been a devastating time. Do you know what World War II alone could have done? Like, not quite as bad, but like the Civil War prior to it, to this whole population game and moving forward and sustaining not just the economy, but the life numbers. But what did we do? We came home, and it was a time of great bliss and family making and neighborhood explosions and workforce explosions. You know what happened. You've studied history. But what happened after the Gulf Wars, Afghan wars? None of that. So throw that in there.
To point to the World War II generation, we call them the greatest generation. In their time, they were called the building generation. Because when they came back, they built families, they built homes, they built businesses, they built a society because they had stared so much death in the face. And at the end of the 20th century, we're looking at more than 20 million people slaughtered by the totalitarian regimes that began in the 40s. And so this is the situation where they came back and said, we better get busy about living because we're fortunate to have come back at all. And they did. So they built up a culture. Now, that American culture, the plug's been pulled out of that system for multiple reasons, many, many reasons. Now, COVID didn't help any. Right? And you would have thought that if people are basically locked up in their homes for 2 years, you're probably going to see the birth rate go up. Didn't happen.
Depression and suicide did.
Yeah, and that's weird. That's very, very weird. You think about the fact that young people are marrying later, not sooner, and that by marrying later, they're minimizing their ability to replace themselves as a husband and wife, as a parental unit, to have 2 kids. Not happening. They're choosing to have children later because of economic strains. There's 100 points of data at least that are all legitimate, that have no religious or political or ideological prejudice to them. They're just facts. They're just facts. Now, but the one that is to me very pertinent right now is one that is in fact being converted into a political regime, and that's the idea of autonomy. There is a spirit of the age, particularly among the younger generations, that whatever it was that held us to a pattern of behavior in the past, whatever was a norm, whatever was the specific, whatever was recommended by the higher class, the older class, the ruling generation, whatever dictate you want to put in it, that the goal of humanity is to become autonomous of whatever standard of life someone else is trying to tell you to conform to, and to be completely independent and completely on your own. Now, we see this manifested particularly in the abortion movement. Abortion starts with A, autonomy starts with A, but the abortion movement isn't driven by abortion. They don't even talk about abortion. We've gone through a number of campaigns now in the United States since the fall of Roe versus Wade. The subject of what is abortion, who has abortions, what are the pros and cons of abortion. Since this is about abortion, let's talk about what we know about abortion. Not discussed at all. Let's talk about freedom. Let's talk about releasing women into the position where they don't have to be held any longer by any restraints of nature, of culture, of family, of society. Total autonomy is what the objective is, so that abortion disappears altogether and it's only talking about reproductive rights. And so it becomes a political banner. Abortion becomes a virtue. It's a symbol. It's what everybody wants to have. And if you're against it, you're actually a slaver. If you're against abortion, you want to restrain and restrict women. You want to force women. They use a term called forced childbirth. Mm-hmm. And so what the goal is that the autonomous women must completely throw off any natural responsibilities or constraints in regards to childbirth. And we must pass laws that completely free them. And it's like, at this point, you cue the music from Les Mis. And all of a sudden, you have the people marching on the stage and singing.
The visual of that, because my 8th grade class in Chicago, we went and saw Les Mis. And I remember it was like a bit much for me. You know what I mean? To handle. But yeah, very heavy dramatic.
Forget about liberty, fraternity, equality. The banners that are over the ramparts now are quite simple. Autonomy and abortion. They both start with A and they virtually mean the same thing.
And it doesn't stop there, right? Because we're seeing that with college, dropout rates, entrance rates. Mm-hmm. Then it becomes about student debt and who should pay it back. We're seeing that with marriage, as I mentioned. We're seeing that with work ethic. We sent everybody home with COVID and then nobody ever wanted to go back to work again. But we saw it with justice, too. Remember when we said cops are bad guys were good? It's all about it. But I have a question, autonomy versus rebellion, even. Walk me through those nuances.
Well, I don't know that in this current manifestation, I'm not sure there is any difference.
Because that's as old as man and time.
Yes, it is.
Rebellion.
And where does autonomy come from? The very concept of autonomy is the idea that to be it basically means no laws. Autonomy means to be void or absent of law. There's no rules, there's no regulations. That's sort of the story of the Garden of Eden, if you will. Right. There were two people on assignment given a certain set of rules. A third agent came into the picture and said, I got a better idea. Forget those rules. You can make your own decision on the rules. They decided to act upon that. And from that point in time, there has been this sense of the God of the universe, the creator, and the autonomous, rebellious human experience.
When you subscribe to 1850 Main Street, you're the first to find out what's happening next with new guests, publications, and events. And when you spread the word about 1850 Main Street, you're helping others find real answers to the real questions facing America right now. To learn more, visit 1850mainstreet.com. And please, tell a friend.
So, and I don't want to distract in any way from what we're talking about, because autonomy and abortion also has been very topical and it's very applicable. But as we walk through this journey of autonomy, which is really rebellion, do you think, you know how we love Francis Schaeffer, do you think the elites that created the whole notion of moral relativism and anything goes versus absolute truth had any idea, like our founding fathers knew, we don't want a democracy that ends in dictatorship or anarchy? You don't want that. Do you think they knew when they introduced the enlightenment of moral relativism that it is a dead-end street that leads to autonomy and chaos, and then also unsustainable numbers of people and taxation and funding?
Yes, I do, Michael.
So it was an intentional destruction.
And here's why. Because you have the French Revolution as a perfect model and example. While the American Revolution was going on, the War for Independence in America was going on, built upon the premise of the Declaration of Independence, that there is a creator, there is a divine order, there is a natural law, and human beings are endowed with rights by nature, and nature is God. And that we have these inherent transcendent rights, that our ability to deal with one another is based upon our acceptance of self-evident truths. and that contained in those self-evident truths are both our natural rights and the proper role of government built on the consent of the governed. And so the framers were very careful when they laid those principles down. They had examined multiple societies. They found out which ones truly worked best, and they modeled the hope for the American experience in that construct, where there is a God, we are not him, and that our rights are universal and transcendent, and that government cannot touch those rights. Government's job is to protect them, and our job is to govern the government because we have the capacity for self-government to begin with. Okay, now, the French said, that's a lot of work and that's a lot of words. Here's an idea. Let's just kill all the monarchs. And let's decentralize all the power, because we're going to place the basis of human reason as the way. Look, we're all in this together, they said. We're all smart. We can all figure this out. Kill all the moral authority above us. Start society over again. And we'll set up a committee that decides who wins and who loses. It was built upon human reason. They wanted to kill all the priests. They wanted to kill all the religious. They wanted to kill all the monarchs. Every form of moral authority was to be destroyed. The American founders watched that happen with the greatest chagrin. They were mortified. They were prepared to go to a full war with France. They felt it was that dangerous. That's why the framers, the founders of this country, hated the concept of democracy, because democracy was France. Democracy was mob rule, and whoever had the power ruled.
And they almost went to the bullpen and brought George Washington out of retirement.
Yeah, George Washington. They had a uniform made for Washington in the closet. He had agreed that if it had come to that, he'd come back out of retirement one more time.
So I'm reading The Atlantic. I'm reading Derek Thompson, and I'm thinking, Derek kind of gets it. I certainly get it. I know you, Derek doesn't. I've had a conversation with you that'll never, ever leave my mind as long as I live. And that's when you pointed me to Woodrow Wilson. And that was the beginning of the path to an administrative state, the takeover from within and the destruction from within. It doesn't change anything of what we're talking about. Too few births, too many deaths equals demographic danger zone and ultimate doom. It's like a parasite. The host will die eventually. But I start piecing this all together and I'm like, that's too many coincidences of destruction. I think it was all intended.
Yes, it's a spirit of destruction. And you go back to the comparison of the French Revolution, the American War for Independence, and then you fast forward, you ask me, is this by design? Yes, it's by design, because here's the big game in all of this. All of this politics is designed to deconstruct the civil order. But they don't want the whole thing to collapse completely and everyone to be killing everybody else. They want it to collapse to a level where the rich and the powerful elites who've been orchestrating a whole lot of this can step in and settle the chaos. That's what Francis Schaeffer said. He said, society cannot tolerate chaos. On the way down, there is a threshold at which it gets so bad, in which point in time people say, I don't care who takes over, somebody has to. And that chaos turns into anarchy. That anarchy requires a totalitarian step in power to recreate order. And at that stage in the game, you've lost the republic. Now you have a dictatorship. And that's the pattern of the man's, whether it's the French Revolution or whether it's the Communist Revolution, it's always the same thing.
I don't know at the end of the day, and we first kind of had this whole conversation texting back and forth. I don't know at the end of the day if the right gets it, if the left gets it, to what end they get it. They'll never agree on the solutions, left and right. But I want to go back to where we began with Derek Thompson from The Atlantic. And here's his quote. Even if you're of the dubious opinion that the U.S. would be better off with smaller population, because that could be you and I, or anybody at these other tables here at 1850 Main Street who are considering stopping after 3 kids. I don't think we can afford it anymore. Stopping after 3 kids. I don't think with both of us working, we could really handle 4 kids. Or the effects of abortion, or the effects of women in the workplace, or the effects of the gay population, or the breakdown of the family, or people not getting married, or abortion, or drug overdose, or violence, or shootings in the streets. I mean, we could do all of the above. Even if you're of the dubious opinion that the U.S. would be better off with a smaller population, the American demographic policy is bad for Americans who are alive right now. That should send, and this is my fellow human being from the far left coming to the same conclusion. We're a nation where families have fewer kids, than they want to have. Where Americans die of violence, drugs, accidents, and illnesses, he's not going to want to get into some of the causes I get into, at higher rates than similarly rich countries. And where geniuses who want to find new jobs, creating companies, are focused to do so in other countries, which then get all the benefits of higher productivity, higher tax revenue, and better jobs. Simply put, the U.S. has too few births, too many deaths, not enough immigrants. Now, this is where you can start heading in the wrong direction. Whether by accident or design or total misunderstanding of basic economics, America has steered itself into the demographic danger zone. Now you can cue Top Gun movie. When we were going back and forth and you started going into autonomy and not even calling it abortion, just A, and autonomy and A and abortion, I started thinking, now you're identifying the very death gene. Thus, if you can identify the gene, you can create and identify the cure. Even if we get the disease right, will we ever agree on the cure?
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.